Welcome back to QuickSpeak. You know, the English podcast, where we really get into all kinds of interesting stuff.
We do.
And today we're talking about something that everyone listening has experienced with stress.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those universal experiences.
And we're not just doing like your generic,
Yeah.
top 10 tips for managing stress.
No. We're going deeper.
We're going deeper. We're looking at the sneaky
My
ways
sneaky ways.
that stress affects us that we don't even realize.
Yes, exactly. Those hidden stressors that are kind of lurking in the background.
Right. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, but it's more like stress by 1,000 tiny annoyances.
I love that analogy.
Right.
Because it's so true. It's those little things that wear us down over time.
Exactly. And one of those little things that I've been hearing more about lately is something called microaggressions.
Yes. Microaggression.
Okay, so first of all, for anyone who's like, what is that? Break it down for us.
So basically, microaggressions are like those subtle, often unintentional forms of discrimination.
Subtle being the key word there.
Subtle is the key word.
Because it's like, you might not even realize that someone is doing it even as it's happening.
Exactly. And that's what makes them so insidious, because it's not always something blatant or overt.
Right. It's not like someone coming up to you and being like, I'm discriminating against you.
Exactly. It's much more insidious.
It's like these little digs and comments and,
those backhanded compliments.
Yes. The backhanded
Yeah,
compliment.
we're like, oh, you're so articulate for someone who,
Or for worst.
Ugh, the worst. It's like, thanks. I think.
So are you saying that even if someone doesn't mean to be offensive or hurtful, if I'm on the receiving end of it, it's still, like, my body is still having a reaction?
Absolutely.
It's not just me being like, oh, I'm so sensitive.
No, not at all. Our bodies are incredibly perceptive, and even if our conscious mind doesn't fully register something as a threat, our subconscious and our nervous system are still picking up on those cues.
Okay, so how does this actually work? Like, what's going on in my body when I experience one of these microaggressions?
Well, basically, your body goes into this low-level stress response, even if you're not consciously aware of feeling stressed.
Okay.
And so your body starts pumping out cortisol, which is our primary stress hormone.
Right, cortisol, the stress hormone.
Exactly.
So it's like my body is reacting to these microaggressions as if they're like a physical threat.
Yeah.
Even though, probably not going to get into a fist fight over a backhanded compliment.
Right, but your body doesn't necessarily know that in the moment.
That's wild.
It's that primal instinct kicking in, and the problem is when these microaggressions are happening repeatedly, it creates a state of chronic stress.
And chronic stress, that's where things get serious, right?
Exactly, because that's when you start to see the real health implications, things like increased risk of heart disease, anxiety, depression.
Yeah, it's like that leaky faucet. You try to ignore it at first because it's just a minor annoyance. But if you let it go on long enough, you're talking about serious water damage.
I like that analogy because it really emphasizes that these seemingly small things can have a cumulative effect on our well-being.
Okay, so we've got these microaggressions kind of like chipping away at our well-being.
Yeah.
But I want to switch gears for a second and talk about something that a lot of people consider a positive trait,
Okay.
even a desirable trait,
I'm intrigued.
which is perfectionism.
Yes. The pursuit of flawlessness.
Right, because on the surface, it sounds like a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm a perfectionist.
You want things to be right.
I want things to be right. I have high standards. I'm detail-oriented.
It's almost like a badge of honor in our culture to
Exactly.
be known as the perfectionist.
What's wrong with that?
Well, the problem is that for many people, that pursuit of perfection comes with a really hefty dose of self-criticism
Okay.
and this fear of failure.
Right, because no matter how much you do, it's never enough. There's always something that could be better.
Exactly. And so you're constantly striving, constantly pushing yourself, but never really feeling a sense of satisfaction or accomplishment.
So how does this tie back to stress?
Well, that constant pressure, that constant striving creates this underlying tension, this feeling of never being good enough. And guess what that does to your stress hormones?
I bet it sends them through the roof.
You got it.
It's like setting yourself up for failure from the get-go.
It really is, because you're chasing this impossible standard,
Right.
and it can actually lead to procrastination
Oh, tell me about it.
because the task feels so daunting.
Yes.
The pressure is so high that it's easier to just avoid it altogether.
Oh, it's the worst. Like, I know I need to get this thing done and it's stressing me out, but then I'm so afraid of not doing it perfectly that I just...
You just end up scrolling through social media,
Exactly. Anything but the task at hand.
which of course just creates more stress in the long run.
It's like a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle of self-sabotage.
Ugh, I hate that I do that to myself.
And it can even start to impact your relationships with others.
Oh, so...
Well, because if you're holding yourself to these impossibly high standards, you might start to do the same with other people.
Oh yeah, I can see that happening.
And that's a recipe for disappointment.
For everyone involved.
Exactly.
Okay, so perfectionism, not so perfect after all.
Not always.
So how do we break free from this, like, I genuinely want to do good work and have high standards, but I also don't want to be ruled by this fear of failure?
Right. It's all about finding that balance.
Balance, okay.
Striving for excellence, but also giving yourself permission to be human, to make mistakes.
I guess that makes sense, because if I'm constantly worried about messing up, then I'm probably not going to be very present or enjoy the process.
Exactly. And that's a key part of it, too. Finding joy in the journey, not just focusing on the end result.
Easier said than done, but I'm trying.
It takes practice.
It does.
But our brains are capable of amazing change.
Okay, so we've talked about how stress can kind of like creep in through these microaggressions and this pressure to be perfect. And I'm guessing this all ties into our favorite topic, sleep, or lack thereof.
Or lack thereof, right? Because sleep is often the first thing to go when we're feeling stressed.
Oh, 100%. Like when I'm stressed out, my brain just won't shut off at night.
Yes, it's like your mind is racing 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I'm exhausted the next day, which just makes everything feel harder and more overwhelming.
It's a vicious cycle.
So you're going to tell me that I actually need to be getting more sleep when I'm stressed, not less.
It seems counterintuitive.
It does.
But yes, getting enough sleep is crucial for managing stress.
Okay, so tell me, why is sleep so important in all of this?
Well, for one thing, when we're sleep deprived, our bodies produce more cortisol.
There's that stress hormone again.
Exactly. And cortisol is actually designed to keep us awake and alert.
Oh no, it's like my own body is working against me.
In a way, yes, because those high cortisol levels can then interfere with our sleep, making it even harder to fall asleep and stay asleep.
So not only am I more likely to lie awake worrying, but my body is actually pumping out hormones that are making it harder to fall asleep.
Exactly.
This is terrible news.
It's not great, but the good news is there are things we can do to improve our sleep hygiene and manage our stress levels.
So what can we do? Like, give me the goods.
Well, first and foremost, we need to prioritize sleep.
Okay, that seems simple enough.
It's about creating those consistent sleep-wake cycles.
So like going to bed and waking up around the same time each day.
Exactly. That helps to regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle.
Okay, so creating those consistent sleep-wake cycles.
Got it. And then there are all those other lifestyle factors that come into play, things like exercise, diet, stress reduction techniques.
Like meditation and deep breathing and all that good stuff.
Exactly. All of those things can make a huge difference in both reducing our overall stress levels and improving our sleep quality.
It's like taking a holistic approach.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Okay, so we've covered how stress can sneak in through these microaggressions and the pressure of perfectionism, how it messes with our sleep, which then just makes the stress worse.
It's a vicious cycle.
It really is.
But it's not just our minds and our sleep that suffer when we're chronically stressed, right?
Right, because stress affects us physically too.
Absolutely. And sometimes the most alarming effects of stress are the ones that we don't even realize are happening.
Like what?
I'm talking about the long-term impact of chronic stress on our physical health.
Okay, because it's not all just in our heads. Our bodies are giving us signals when something's off.
Exactly. Our bodies are constantly communicating with us.
But we're so used to feeling stressed that we often just ignore those signals.
I normalize it.
Right, like, oh, my stomach's always in knots. That's just my life.
Exactly. But those persistent aches, digestive issues, insomnia, those are all our body's way of saying, hey, something's not right here.
It's like our own personal check engine light.
And we all know what happens when we ignore those for too long.
Expensive car repairs.
Exactly.
Okay, so stress manifests physically in a lot of different ways. But what's one of the most common ways we experience this?
Well, anxiety is a big one.
Okay, anxiety.
And we often think of anxiety as purely mental, those racing thoughts, the worry.
Right.
But it affects us physically, too. Oh, tell me about it. I swear, whenever I'm super stressed, I get this knot in my stomach, like a pit in my stomach.
That's your digestive system reacting to the surge of stress hormones.
I hate it.
But it can also show up as muscle tension, headaches, dizziness.
It's like your whole body is on high alert.
Exactly. Your body is in that fight or flight mode, ready to either confront the stressor or run away.
Even if there's no actual danger.
Even if there's no actual danger,
Yeah.
your body is still perceiving a threat.
So what does this do to our bodies in the long run?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is the impact on our cardiovascular system.
That's the link between stress and heart disease, right?
Exactly, because when we're chronically stressed, our blood pressure and heart rate stay elevated for longer periods of time, and that puts a lot of strain on our hearts.
And not only that, but when we're stressed, we're also more likely to engage in unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Absolutely. Things like overeating, not exercising, smoking, all of those things further increase our risk of heart disease and other health
So it's
problems.
like this dominant effect. Exactly. And what's interesting is that research suggests that men and women often experience and cope with stress differently.
Oh yeah, I've heard about this. Isn't it partly biological?
It is.
Okay, so tell me more about this.
Well, in general, men tend to have more of that classic fight or flight response to stress.
So like adrenaline pumping, heart racing, ready to fight a bear.
Exactly.
Right.
Women, on the other hand, often experience what's called a tend and befriend response.
Tend and befriend. What's that?
So this is about seeking out social support and nurturing relationships.
So instead of fighting the bear, I'm going to go find my friends and we're going to bake a cake.
Well, not exactly, but you're getting the idea.
Okay.
It's about connecting with others and seeking comfort and support.
So are you saying that this is why women are more likely to reach out for help when they're stressed?
It could be a factor.
Interesting.
Of course, these are just general tendencies and everyone is different.
Right.
But it's important to recognize that these biological and social factors can play a role in how we experience and cope with stress.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've talked about so much today. Everything from those sneaky microaggressions to the pressure perfectionism to the mind-body connection and how stress affects us physically.
A lot to process.
It is. But it's so important to be aware of all of this because stress really does impact every aspect of our lives.
It does.
So what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this episode?
I think the most important thing is to remember that you're not alone in this.
We've all been there.
We have, and there are things you can do to manage your stress and improve your overall well-being.
Exactly. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, reach out for support. Try those stress reduction techniques. And most importantly, be kind to yourself.
Yeah, self-care is not selfish.
It's essential.
Exactly.
And on that note, we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What resonated with you most in this episode? What are your go-to stress-busting techniques? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the science of stress, be sure to subscribe to the QuickSpeak channel for more thought-provoking conversations on all sorts of fascinating topics.
That's right. And let us know what you'd like us to talk about next. Until then, thanks for listening.